COVID-19 cases surge again in the United States, inflation on the rise, while President Biden tries to persuade Congress to pass a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Lots to talk about this Wednesday. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Prices are going up in the United States. The country is dealing with inflation that could derail the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, which, by the way, is not totally under control. The rate of infections is rising in many states as vaccination rates are going down. But the biggest news today is President Joe Biden's visit to Capitol Hill. He met with politicians from the Democratic Party and pushed his plans to invest trillions of dollars in infrastructure. With a slim majority in Congress, Biden cannot afford to lose votes.
I have no comments, just saying it was great to be home, great to be back with all my colleagues, and I think we're going to get a lot done.
As I said, there's a lot to discuss. Let's bring in our experts, all here in Washington, D.C. Chris Prudhomme is a Republican strategist and president of Sun Vision Strategies. Douglas Sloan is the principal at National Capital Strategy Group. William Lee is the chief economist at the Milken Institute, and Joseph Williams is senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Douglas Sloan, let me start with you. President Biden went to the United States Congress on Wednesday to rally support among Democrats for his two spending bills totaling $4 trillion. If we look at these spending bills, they represent his economic agenda, really. They would pay for critical infrastructure, as well as improvements in healthcare, as well as help for families. What are the chances of these two bills passing, given that the president actually had to go to Capitol Hill to rally support among his own supporters?
Well, I feel that these bills are going to pass. No one in Congress loves anything more than a good old-fashioned infrastructure bill that they can go back to their districts and tout that they're helping the economy, the local economies, and helping their constituents by repairing the roads and the bridges and the infrastructure in their own districts. So given that we're looking at crumbling national infrastructure and we're still reeling from this health pandemic, I'm confident that Biden will be able to get these bills through regardless of the price tag, because they are really needed in this country and for our economy.
Right, that's the practical side of it, which makes complete sense, Douglas. But what about the political side of it? We know that the Republicans don't want this president to have any kind of big victory, especially with the midterms coming up next year.
Yeah, I agree. But the bottom line is Republicans also have to show that they're not just against everything, but actually trying to help their constituents and in favor of something. The Republicans are suffering from this no pushback narrative that is forming, that they're actually not trying to do anything to help anybody. And Americans coming out of this pandemic that are still reeling economically from COVID need the politicians in Washington to work together to move forward to get some results. So I'm confident, again, that Biden will be able to get this through because of the general overall issues that we're dealing with coming through this pandemic.
Chris Prudhomme, do you see any Republican support for these bills? I mean, it's going to be hard to oppose for the very reasons that Douglas Sloan told us a moment ago.
Look, so ironically, I actually agree with Douglas in one aspect, because the reality is this. We have the same thing, obviously, when Trump was in office, right? You had Democrats who no, and that was a big issue. So, look, I think the American people are tired of politicians. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. They're tired of political nonsense. American people don't care about that. They care about getting things done, like Douglas said, about results and getting things done. And that's what we have to get back to. I'm always an advocate, that you guys know, of being fair and being in the middle. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of this immense spending bill. This is absolutely it's a large amount of money. And look, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of people who are still suffering with the effects of the pandemic from a financial standpoint. Even folks who are going back to work. When you look at this time last year, we're still 7.7 million, jobs short. But the reality is that even folks that are going back to work now, they're not going back full time. These folks are going back part time, and the hours are just not there like they were there before. So we definitely have to be cognizant of that. And I do think that Republicans will look at that. Look what's happening in the Georgia and the special election now. The spread shows 22 points favor Republicans. So I think there's a lot of different dynamics that are taking place now. And I don't see the support of a bill that immense, but I do think that something ultimately may happen. There may obviously be an agreement somewhere with some type of compromise, because to Douglas's point, the Republican Party does not want to appear as the bottleneck for anything to get done for the American people. I think people are tired overall. Look what happened, how long it took to get stimulus, more support when Trump was in office. Due to the Democrats, obviously they didn't want Trump to have a victory. So people saw things like that, and I think people are tired of things like that. So I do believe that the Republican Party remembers those things, obviously, and will look at that and say, hey, it's time that obviously we have to do something different. We can't appear to our constituencies and our base that we don't want to accomplish anything just because we don't like Biden. I think that's something that is going to come into play. So I believe something ultimately will take place, perhaps, but how large of a level it is, we're definitely have to see and take a look at that.
Joseph Williams, Democrats brokered their own $3.5 trillion bill. It's known as the Reconciliation Blueprint, and it provides for spending on federal health, education, and social programs. This can be passed by a process known as reconciliation, which requires just a simple majority in Congress. Is that going to happen?
Well, a simple majority when it comes to the Democrats is almost an oxymoron, because you've got a spectrum of viewpoints in the Democratic Party, including centrists, and everybody knows the name of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but there are others who belong to that constituency, not the least of which is Maggie Hassan, Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire. They're both kind of considered centrists, as well as Mark Warner, who is in the farther right reaches of the Democratic Party. However, Warner himself is on board, so that's a fairly decent sign that the Democrats may be able to get it done. But they're always full of surprises. There's no guarantee that Sinema and Manchin have spoken up. The fact that Warner is the furthermost rightward Democrat who says this is a good thing and gives it a thumbs up, that's an important sign. But we know that Manchin and Sinema tend to be contrarians, so it's important to get them on board. And I think that's one of the reasons why Biden had to come to Capitol Hill and make sure that the deal gets done. On the other hand, progressives are unhappy with this bill. They're not. Bernie Sanders gave it its imprimatur, but progressives say that the bill should be bigger, that more should be in it, that it doesn't necessarily contain all of the things that Biden promised on the campaign trail. So you've got extremes in the Democratic Party that you're going to have to work to bring in the fold if you're President Biden. But you do have the two most extreme influential senators who give it a thumbs up, and that's an important sign.
Joseph, is there a risk that in the interests of getting this bill passed, that there could be compromises which would effectively gut this bill?
There is actually absolutely the risk. I kind of liken this part of the negotiation to solving a Rubik's Cube. You've got to get all the sides in one color, and that's really hard when you've got this kind of a constituency. So bargains have to be made. Warner himself said it's going to be a tough slog. It's going to be a long summer of back and forth, even among the Democrats, and that's without factoring in the fact that you're going to have to get this through the House side, where there are some more, there's just as little wiggle room there than there is in the Senate.
William Lee, what do you make of the two sides' respective views on these bills?
You know, everyone favors infrastructure. The problem is the two bills are not all infrastructure. In fact, most estimates are that less than half of it would be. Infrastructure is something that would not contribute to inflation, would not really contribute to the deficit in the long run, because infrastructure is something that can be paid for by financing in the financial markets. Private-public partnerships can go a long way to financing the infrastructure, true infrastructure, that improves the productive capacity of this economy. Going forward, I think the problem is that Biden wants to expand the entitlements programs that people are where they are entitled to education, they're entitled to more health care, more child care, more care of sorts that are provided by government. That's where the controversy is coming from. So to call everything infrastructure is a way to try to fool people into thinking if you're against this bill, you're against America, you're against apple pie and motherhood. But in fact, the bill itself is fraught with a lot of pork and the usual stuff that politicians are famous for.
Dr. Sloan, you want to respond to that?
God forbid people are in support of education and jobs and many of the other things that he mentioned to try to get this economy back on track. Listen, we are facing an unprecedented historic event with this COVID-19 pandemic. It is going to take more than just your normal infrastructure bill to get everything back on track and to right this economy and, quite frankly, right this nation. So it is going to be a big bill. It is going to have some add-ons. It is going to include things for childcare and healthcare and education. I mean, those are not bad things that we're talking about there. Those are good things that are going to help the American people, both Democrats and Republicans. So, I don't see the big issue there. I understand what he's saying, but we are coming out of an historic disaster with this pandemic, and you know, all bets are off in terms of trying to right the economy and try to attain some sense of normalcy. We really have to think and operate outside the box.
William Lee, just one other point. I mean, these are big bills, trillions of dollars. We're looking at it in its entirety. What will these bills do for the U.S. economy?
Well, if they were truly needed to bolster the education system and healthcare system, I think everyone would be in favor of it. The trouble is, they're so broad and unfocused that the concern is that there's going to be a lot of waste. One of the things that people have to be concerned about is how to finance a good thing. Yes, everyone's in favor of a good thing, but how do you pay for it? Raising taxes is one way, financing it with debt is another.
Yeah.
But we already have a huge historical overload of debt. So, and taxes seem to be even Joe Biden recognizes that taxes have their limits, and pushing it on corporations is just another way of pushing it back onto workers, because every economist will tell you that a corporate income tax is at least half to 3/4 shoved back onto workers. So essentially we're putting the tax burden on the people who can least afford it.
Douglas, I'm going to move right now on to inflation. It's a worrying trend that we see in the country. Prices rose by 5.4% in June over last year. How serious is this for the country?
Well, you know, a lot of people seem to be ready to jump the gun and push the panic button, but I am more in line with Fed Chairman Powell, who is saying that, you know, this is, again, you know, coming out of this historic pandemic. This is to be expected. You know, we're going through a big economic resurgence. The economy is attempting to right itself, and it's going to take time. And we shouldn't be so quick to jump and panic and hit the panic button and try to adjust rates while we're going through these changes of trying to get back to normal. So I am right in line with the Fed chairman. He says that this is going to happen, and he expects the economy, things to slow down and inflation to come back down within a short period of time. And I fully support that.
Chris Prudhomme, as Douglas Sloan just told us, the Fed chairman, in fact, said that prices will go down as the economy grows. The White House has been repeating that as well. But Republicans say that inflation is with us for some time and is more severe than was expected. What is your view on this?
I certainly do think it's going to be actually with us for some time and a lot more. I'll give you an exact example, prime example. I hate to use brand names, but the reality is that you used to be able to go to Costco prior to the pandemic, right? And you used to be able to look at a pack of beef ribs for literally $17. I went in there the other day. The same exact pack is $42 now, $42. Over double the price. I think we have some real issues going on. There's been numerous articles about it in the last couple of days. Look at the price of beef. Everyone knows it. It's sky high. Airline tickets. Look, and I understand it's been a challenging time for many people, many businesses, right? Many individuals. And I feel like some of these companies are trying to, I hate to say it, but they're trying to make up for lost time, so to speak, and lost money. Right. But I think we're certainly in for a challenging time. I mean, it's right in front of us. You can see it. These astronomical rental car prices. I was in Florida for a meeting, and literally $600 a day for rental car. Absolutely insane. But these are the type of thing. Now that's and obviously not only an example, but the reality is that these things are taking place as we know it right now as we speak. I think we're certainly in for a very, very tough ride, a very challenging ride. You have companies who are realizing that their overhead has been kept low for the past year and a half with the pandemic. They're looking at a lot of things different, downsizing how they do their business, how they operate. Look at a lot of the hotel organizations and franchises. They're now utilizing instead of utilizing, let's say, 25, 30 people for, now they usually have 3 or 4 people for something that can be done. So I've talked to food and beverage directors myself at certain hotel organizations.
Yeah,
so
Chris,
it's certain.
we do have some reason to be optimistic, don't we? I mean, the IMF told us just a couple of weeks ago that this economy in the United States is expected to grow by 7%.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, perhaps so, but the reality is that, so I look at that from a factual standpoint. I think we all do from a business perspective, right? When it comes down to look at the American people, yes, it's summertime. People are spending money, et cetera. People are on vacation. They're enthusiastic. But overall, that's not the case. That simply is not the case overall. People are obviously having immense financial challenges. Let's not forget about the enhanced child tax credit that goes into effect July 15th, actually, tomorrow, July 15th, where payments start going out to I think 88% of Americans, children, families will start receiving those payments. And we're certainly in for a tough ride. So people are not necessarily making money on their own. Yes, some are, but there's a lot of folks who are still getting support from many government aspects. Again, the enhanced child tax credit is a prime example. That's keeping people up at $3,600 a month. These are monthly payments that are going to be taking place, monthly payments.
William Lee, what, in your view, are the main factors driving prices up right now?
Well, the price increases right now we're seeing are due to the reopening. And the rapid growth we see is because people are finally getting to normalize their lives again and going back to spending, and they have a lot of savings by not spending over the last year, and they wanted to say, let me get on with life. So everyone wants to do the same thing at the same time. They want to buy a new car, they want to go to get an airplane ticket, and the supply constraints are pushing up prices. Inflation has a huge political consequence, and one of the reasons central bankers are so afraid of inflation is because it hits the poor the hardest. And the corrosive kind of inflation we had in the 60s and 70s are just the prime example of where poor people are hurt the most. So the Fed is doing its best to try to contain inflation, but the price increases, the price pops that are associated with supply side bottlenecks is not the sort of inflation that we had in the 70s, and we shouldn't mix the two. Yes, a lot of people are suffering because food prices, energy prices, gasoline prices, and housing prices, new house prices, are going skyrocketing. But poor people are not buying new houses. They are eating, and that's where the problem comes from, is that the temporary bout of price increases in food and basic necessities like gasoline are hurting people the most, and a temporary bout of extra spending to make up for income to buy these extra, more expensive goods and services would be a right thing to do, but it's a temporary thing. Once the supply conditions come back online again, once the farmers get back into work, once the supply from lumber from Canada starts to come back again, we'll see prices normalize, and the rate of inflation will actually come back to 2%. In fact, the Fed had a problem of keeping inflation up above 2% because productivity and the quality, high quality of new goods and services being produced kept prices going up, and in fact had some disinflationary factors pushing prices down. So I think one of the things that we're going to have to deal with going forward is how to deal with productivity enhancing kind of price changes that also shift job demands so that people have to be more skilled, and low wage workers are not going to be able to find jobs because they don't have the skills needed in the new economy.
Joseph Williams, as William Lee just told us, inflation has enormous political consequences. If prices continue to go up in 2021 into 2022, what would be the political consequences, remembering, of course, that we have that very important midterm election coming up towards the end of 2022?
Well, I think the consequences are somewhat obvious. I mean, Biden would be in trouble. They would be at risk of losing both the House and the Senate, and that would grind his agenda, the president's agenda, to a complete halt. That being said, it is looking like this is a temporary spike, and the signs are, if you're going to have inflation, this is the good kind to have, right? Where the economy is growing at a huge clip. People have money in their pockets, if not from this child tax credit, then certainly from the enhanced unemployment benefits. And it seems like there's almost a reset to the economy. But that's coming with its own fraught peril as well. It may reset in a way that's not advantageous to the president. It may reset that you still have restaurants and businesses looking for people to come in and work for them, but they don't want to because these wages are too low and they have a difficult time getting new employees, and business gets driven down. Something we haven't talked about yet, which we probably will, is the pandemic is still kind of lurking in the background, and it's in most states that are developed or have huge economies. the pandemic is almost over, but we still have a tier of southern states. We have a tier of mostly rural, kind of agrarian states that are resisting the vaccine. I'm talking about Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana to a degree, Alabama. Those are all states that are very much pro-Republican, and they have not embraced the vaccine, and they have not been able to get their economy started as a result, and that can blow back on President Biden in a way that could harm him, could harm his party in the midterms.
Joseph, you've given me a great segue into COVID. I want to go to Douglas Sloan for this. Douglas, if we look at the battle against COVID, President Biden has missed his target to have at least 70% of the adult population vaccinated with at least one dose by July 4th, which was Independence Day. He didn't miss it by much. It was in the upper 60s. But numbers are starting to go up again. And we see that. If you look, I looked at the New York Times today, and it said that the numbers have gone up by 109% over the last 14 days. And if we look at it, most of it's attributed to the Delta variant of the virus. How big a setback is this?
Well, it's a setback that, by and large, is unforeseen. Like the last gentleman that was speaking pointed out, it's largely among red states that we're seeing this vaccine hesitancy and this rejection of science, where you have largely white Republicans that are refusing to get the vaccine. Now, of course, you still have some vaccine hesitancy within communities of color, of course, with Hispanic and Black communities that, quite frankly, just need to be more educated about the vaccine. And studies are showing that once we're getting out and reaching out into those communities and we are educating people about the vaccine and about the dangers of COVID, that those vaccine rates, that the people are coming along and people are going out to get the vaccine. But in these red states, like you mentioned, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, this is unheard of. It's incredible that we're seeing this wholesale rejection of science. Even in Tennessee, I just read an article, I'll pull it up so I can remember, they completely abandoned vaccine outreach to minors, not for just COVID vaccine, but for all vaccines. This is ridiculous. I'm at a loss. I struggle to make sense of it, but this is what we're faced with. And of course, you're going to blame Biden for it, but a lot of this is happening in red states. They're rejecting the science, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Chris Prudhomme, almost all the new infections that we are seeing right now is because of the Delta variant, and also it's taken place almost exclusively among people who have not been vaccinated. Now, we have seen a big push by the White House to get young people vaccinated, but as we've heard from two of our previous guests, the big problem is among people in the South. Mainly people who are Republican. How does one change it? What do you make of this current situation?
So I don't think that it can change. Like, I think people that are apprehensive to take the vaccine, part of it has to do obviously with the swiftness. I think there's a lot of skepticism, with WHO, and there's obviously with Dr. Fauci. Dr. Tedros with the World Health Organization. There's just a lot of different dynamics, and obviously this entire process, people have seen obviously the people speak and things not adding up. And look, and when it comes to the vaccine, I talked to many of them, as you know, especially for folks in the Republican Party, and something that's not approved completely by the FDA, and that's an emergency vaccine. They just don't feel comfortable enough to take it yet. They don't want to be used as a quote unquote experiment. They like to take their chances and say, hey, they haven't been sick thus far. They take their vitamins, they do other things, and they figure that they will take their chances as opposed to having something injected in them that they're not 100% certain about, and that's just simply it. And I think people look at I think people look at the scale of the amount of infections versus the amount the population in America here, especially in America, and they look at it and say, hey, look, at the end of the day, look, and yes, it is sad that many people have died from it, yes, and have gotten sick and have some really with effects right now, but other folks are just saying the percentage is just not that high, and they're willing to take their chances on it.
But isn't what we're seeing right now, Chris, the fact that this pandemic was politicized so early?
Absolutely. When you look at absolutely, it's a great question. When you look at Dr. Tedros, right, with the World Health Organization, I mean, everything we obviously knew about it, and the lies that the misinformation from the World Health Organization initially, right, everything obviously from human transmission. That was a major issue back in January at the time when Trump was in office. These are the type of things that are making a lot of people apprehensive, because there's a lot of skepticism as to what actually occurred, how quickly it occurred, where did it originate from. These are all things that obviously delayed the process and caused a lot of political skepticism. And as it is right now, I think if people were transparent on both ends, it would be a different dynamic right now. But because there was not a lot of transparency, there were a lot of secrets, especially from the World Health Organization, as opposed to what actually happened, how this virus originated. That's a lot of apprehension as it is.
Yeah, there are those who will say that it was President Trump that politicized this, but that's a completely different subject for another day. I want to go to William Lee. William Lee, the country is making an economic recovery from the pandemic. It's happening right now. At least employment levels are going up, and we know, as I said earlier on, that predicted growth is pretty high. But could all this be undermined by this variant in the months ahead?
Oh, absolutely. And let's not forget the source of the recession itself was because of the administrative shutdown in order to contain the virus. Our discussion so far is really focused on U.S. and the vaccination rates in the U.S., but let's not forget the rest of the world is nowhere near U.S. levels of vaccination, and the source of a lot of the variants have come from the countries where India and South Africa and places where there's hardly 1 or 2% of the population that's been vaccinated. So let's not lose perspective that the lack of vaccination is not just the U.S., but mainly in the emerging markets where the vaccine distribution has really lagged behind developed countries. And that's where the effort has got to be to vaccinate more people.
Right, as the experts have been telling us, no one is safe until everyone is safe. Joseph Williams, very quickly, I've got a minute left, just one other point. Pfizer announced a booster shot about a week ago, effectively a third shot to safeguard against infections, and something that they say could help significantly against the variant. But the White House said, not so fast. We're not so concerned about this third shot right now. Anthony Fauci of this also said the same thing. Not necessary. But there's a confusing message here with Pfizer saying you need this shot, the politicians saying not so fast. Is it a question of money? Is that the reason the White House is pushing back?
Well, I think it's also a question of the fact that they want to get everybody on the same page, and that putting out a booster is almost like putting the cart before the horse, especially when you have vast regions that are skeptical of the vaccine from the jump. So in order to get them on board, if you put a third vaccine, you're going to need a booster shot almost as soon as you get the first one. That even drives up hesitancy even further. And let's not forget that we still have commentators on Fox News saying that the vaccine itself is a plot against the government, of the government to inject you with a tracking device or a microchip. So there are a lot of factors at play here. I think he's trying to keep a consistent message and try not to confuse people before we get the first step accomplished fully.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. But the conversation continues online. Join us on CGTN America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show. Or chat with us on Twitter at CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.